University and Microsoft South Africa for making it possible for us to host this Lekgotla virtually. We also want to thank the distinguished guests that attended, but also thank His Excellency, our President Ramaphosa, who always attends our Lekgotlas, even here he was present. We also had a beautiful lineup of scholars from local, from the continent, and also our international speakers. Amongst all the speakers we had were the privilege of being addressed by the Director General, Mr. E. Abidi from Kenya. We had the privilege of also being blessed by having a representative from Namibia, Ms. Steenekamp, who is an Executive Director in the Ministry of Education and Arts. We also had Dr. Niyiz Zamuridare from Rwanda, who's the head of ICT in Rwanda. We also had a representative from Zim, Dr. Niyiza Mtiriwa, who represented Zimbabwe, but we also have the Permanent Secretary of Zimbabwe, Ms. Tabela, who is a Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. Canada was represented by Mr. Clanfield, who is a teacher, a trainer, an education a consultant. We had Professor Dr. Ansari from Canada, who is a researcher in developmental cognitive neuroscience. In China, we had Mr. Li, who's in the embassy as an education counselor. From Finland, we had Mr. Heinonen, who is also a Director General in the Finnish National Agency of Education. From France, we had Mrs. Nikitenko, who's the Director and Delegation of International Relations, Minister of Education for Italy, United Kingdom, and America. But we're also honored with a number of scholars and representatives. We had our own secretary from ADIA, which is an African Development Education Agency, Mr. Nseguyumva. We had from UNESCO, from IBE, which is an International Bureau for Education, we had Mr. Opeti. We had representatives from UNICEF, with Dr. Jenkins. We also had representatives from OECD, but from UNICEF, we also had Dr. Camperidou. We also had from UNICEF, Dr. Yang Rana. From OECD, we had Professor Schleicher, but we also had Mema Rupi, who represented World Heritage. Locally, we also had lots of input that we got from our own scholars and researchers. We had Dr. Rufus Polio from DBE, Dr. Rako Metsi was represented by his colleague because he was not well, from Umalusi. We had Professor Velapi, head of pediatrics, and also a member of the Ministerial Committee on COVID-19, whose focus is on school safety and university safety. We had our own principal, Memam Gomez Zulu, who's a principal in our schools. We had Mr. Ngasana, who's the chairperson of NECT. We had Mr. Mugwenya Maluleke, the secretary of SADTU. We had Advocate Paul Collis, who is the Secretary General, it's not even the Chief Executive Officer of FEDSAS, and our own Dr. Shetus from DBE, Ms. Cheryl Watson from DBE, Mr. Basil Manuel from NAPTOSA, with Dr. Gustafson from DBE, Ms. Topper from Onderwijzer INI, and Professor Suhole, who is the head of education at the University of Pretoria. And we want to thank all these participants for very rich inputs that they gave us. I can't express our gratitude and appreciation for the invaluable inputs that were made at this Lekgotla over the last 3 days. I just want to highlight a few of them that I thought were critical without undermining those that I'm not going to mention. I think mainly in the last few days, our esteemed speakers opined that the days of doing business as usual are over. They expressed their view that we have to move in haste in engaging in business unusual. Even from His Excellency, the President, and the three speakers who innovatively presented their country's program and actions, they emphasize the importance of our theme, namely equipping learners with knowledge and skills for a changing world. Clearly, COVID-19 brought with it devastation, hardship, and misery. But it also brought with it lots of opportunities as well. Professor Velapi stressed the importance of non-pharmaceutical and the importance of total adherence to the safety and health protocols that have been set by the country. And I just want to repeat them for emphasis. He emphasized the importance of social distancing, of continuous wearing of masks, of covering one's nose and mouth, of washing hands with soap and water, or sanitize with 70% alcohol-based sanitizers. And also making sure that there's adequate ventilation in our schools. Just to quote on what Mrs. Mgomezulu said, which I thought was very helpful, she concluded her input by quoting Peter Decker, and I quote, she said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but it is to act with yesterday's logic." So clearly, amongst the critical tasks we must perform with zeal is the rethinking, the repositioning, the reimagining of our curriculum delivery, theory, practice, and instruments of teaching and learning, even our learning spaces, teacher development, as well as learning and assessment. The horizontal sequential chain of events, which was advocated by Dr. Marupe, should influence our thinking. Critical in this process must be what and how children learn. The experiences which were shared with us and situational analysis presented over the past 3 days, they must guide our work in the reconfiguration of pedagogical and didactic processes. Clearly, there must be systemic but urgent introduction of ICTs in our schools, and most speakers emphasize or confirm that this is unavoidable. And we agree that ICTs indeed cannot replace teachers, and I think that's what all the speakers said, but also added that they are critical in augmenting the work of the teacher. True, purposeful, and effective collaboration and partnerships will clearly drive the reconfiguration and the reposition of basic education. After all, the ruling party, the ANC, had declared education as a societal matter. From this Lekgotla, all our committees must put hands on deck. The Secretary of SATU, Mr. Maluleke, said that from the Director General, from Provincial Superintendent Generals to our officials and social partners, they all must be instrumental in developing a quote, proper and effective connections of the system and of the basic education system. The international lessons and experience that were shared by UNESCO, the IEB, as I said, which is the International Bureau of Education, OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Development, UNICEF, the World Heritage Group, the African continent, and the international speakers that were here, scholars and researchers that presented, should not be viewed as just another talk shop, but we commit to use them to propel our sector to levels which are unimaginable. If we can learn from the resilience of our learners and teachers in 2020, nothing will be impossible. Mr. Christopers was correct when he said the system and its operations must remain accountable. Professional autonomy must be coupled with unquestionable accountability. And if we do this, the success of education systems such as Finland and many others will remain an elusive dream if we don't do that. Therefore, the following amongst us should characterize the reimagined, reconfigured, and repositioned education system that will enable us and our country to continue to equip our learners with knowledge and skills for a changing world. Most speakers said the mindset required in times of uncertainty should be based on the thinking that these exceptional times require a blend of courage, of humility, and of clarity. COVID-19 gave rise to definitive areas that we can build on creatively to push us into the future. Educators as accountable leaders and professionals, as well as teaching and learning can happen outside the school walls. There are three areas of focus in our attempts to reimagine, reconfigure, and reposition our basic education system: the ICT rollout, teacher development, and curriculum redesign from content-based to competency-based. They also emphasize the importance of collaboration and partnership within the sector. They also emphasize the importance of ensuring that social justice principles of access, of redress, of equity, of inclusivity, of efficiency and quality anchor the reimagination of a blended education system. And children's social circumstances, we were also informed that affect their development and the ability to learn, and therefore it is very important to ensure that we at all times put in place psychosocial support for our learners and also support them with empathy. Program director, I don't want to repeat what the different scholars have said, but I really want to take this opportunity to thank again the NECT, to thank Microsoft South Africa, but most important to thank our participants and our speakers for honoring us with their presence here. And again, we want to remind people that we have a link which is attached to the Lekgotla, where even people who are not part of Lekgotla can access the discussions and also have a feel of what are the things that members raised. I want to take, if it was traveling, I would say bon voyage, but I want to say stay well. And thank you very much for the participation. And thank you very much for the leadership that we received today. But thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your words. There's nothing to add on to what you have said. We want to underline what you've said. Two things: partnership and dialogic engagement have been the key, messages, from your speech, and how we have all as partners, come together to address the pandemic since last year. I do, at this point, like to take the opportunity to once again thank everyone for making the time and staying through the 3 days of the Lekgotla. All the information, all the presentations, the recordings are on the DBE website, and you could continue and put in your comments, which will be used to finalize the reports, as well as to prepare for the next Lekgotla next year. Thank you very much. May you have a good day further. The Lekgotla is closed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to all participants.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, everyone.
Angie Motshekga, wrapping up the 2021 virtual basic education Lekgotla, the first virtual Lekgotla, which took place over 2.5 days under the theme Equipping Learners with Knowledge and Skills for a Changing World. We heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa at the start of this Lekgotla, and putting a huge emphasis on the fourth industrial revolution and the need to ensure that learners have the best possible chance of exceeding in this fast-paced global environment. The last 2.5 days, the Lekgotla featured experts from South Africa, Kenya, Canada, China, Finland, and other countries, and they shared their best practices, which will hopefully hold these various countries, as well as South Africa in particular, in good stead going forward in how to deal with COVID-19 in particular as well. All right, let's take a quick break. I'll get you more news.